So my name's Euan, I'm a doctor, and I'm into drugs and alcohol. That's very much a special interest for me. I think there's lots of doctors have special interests. I'm particularly interested in hard drugs. It's a slightly weird concept, hard drugs and soft drugs. When we think about the people, we just think about the drugs. And the drugs, particularly hard drugs, they're not like, they're not like a broken nose. And it's not like they're got love and hate on their knuckles. And whatever you do not spill their pint. That's hard drugs. The people who take them can be perfectly lovely, and often are. But I particularly like hard drugs, and perhaps the hardest drug that we need to think about is heroin, of course. And the thing about heroin is, this is where I bring the gravitas. I've got a way of thinking about heroin, and basically you've got to think about a hormonal teenager having a sock wank. Sorry, so this is the gravitas bit, but bear with me. The whole point about this is, you think about it all the time, the cravings are always there, and it's all over in about a minute, really quick, and 3 or 4 hours later, they want to go again. That's heroin, and there's a little bit of sadness with it as well, I think. And so I think there's a great deal of parallels there with the teenage things. As I say, there is some sadness, and an important thing to bear in mind is that there's some downsides with heroin as well. Of course, the thing I forgot to mention about the sock wank is it's orgasmic. Heroin feels amazing. It's perfectly rational to take it when it makes you feel that good. But there are downsides, and that's where I come in. And one of the things I do as a doctor is prescribe methadone for people. And methadone is a remarkable drug, really long-acting. It just goes on and on and on. It is, compared to heroin's sock wank, it is the tantric sex. It just lasts and lasts and lasts. What could be better? But the weird thing is, actually, methadone's got a lot of stigma associated with it. A lot of people really actually hate it. It's the Millwall of medications. It's the Gavin Williamson of drug treatment options. And I think that the whole thing about that is that with the Gavin Williamson, it's not fair, is it? And it's not fair on methadone, of course. It's not about Gavin Williamson. Methadone hasn't fucked up a generation of children, been sacked twice, and got knighted for it. Arise, Sir Gav, you absolute arse biscuit. I believe those are the exact words that the Queen will use. There's a lot to be said for long-acting drugs, and it's particularly Big Pharma, the pharmaceutical industry, really loves long-acting drugs because it stops them having to invent anything new. They just take the old ones and they stretch them out a bit, maybe for a day, maybe for a week, get an injectable formulation and it lasts a month. That's perfect, and we're certainly seeing that in the drug treatment sector with some of the drugs that we've got involved with just now. And but I think we could go further with long-acting drugs. What about alcohol? Imagine having one drink, being completely pissed for a week. You'd certainly have to do some planning. I do think that there is an argument that Glasgow got there already with that. And speaking of Glasgow, I want to go on to talk about Blackpool. I suspect that's where our Glaswegians downstairs were heading. Because everybody from Glasgow, everybody loves Blackpool. And that's where I do my drug treatment work. And Blackpool's an amazing place. It's got the tower, it's got the ballroom, Strictly love it, Tess and Claudia. They're always going on about how wonderful Blackpool is. And it certainly has a lot of character. If by character you mean hard drugs, rampant abuse of alcohol, and plenty of deep-fried produce to get stuck into as well. I mean, I like it. I think we can all agree it's a party town, and there's certainly no shortage of employment as long as you count sex work. I would like to say that I really love Blackpool. The people there are amazing. I've had an incredible time working in Blackpool, and I wouldn't want to do it anywhere else. But it has got its problems, it has got its challenges. And one of the challenges it's got is it has got the highest drug-related death rate in England. And I would like to say at this point, it's extremely, the GMC have asked me to point it out, that in fact, although I am one of the senior doctors in Blackpool, that drug-related death is completely unrelated to I'm doing my best, people. But the only place that can beat Blackpool for drug-related death is, in fact, Scotland. And that might partly be why Glaswegians love Blackpool so much. They can't stop coming. The Glaswegians, they arrive from the coast by the coachload. And we could arguably call it Glasgow by the sea. I do recognise that Glasgow is actually by the sea. But go with me on this, please. And it's not clear why Glaswegians like it, whether it's the alcohol, the drugs, or the deep-fried goods. There could be possibilities. I do have a theory as well that there may be some undiscovered homing device in livers. And a bit like the elephant's graveyard, livers get drawn towards Blackpool as a place to die, like in some old Tarzan movie. That might be a possibility. But I think also there's a nostalgia thing that's going on. And we all suffer from nostalgia. Lots of people have had really incredibly wonderful holidays in Blackpool over the years, and that pulls them back. Nostalgia's got a lot to answer for. I suspect Brexit is high up on the list of problems that have been caused by nostalgia as well. All of our people who use drugs, they tend to be very nostalgic as well. They're getting a little bit older now, but there's a clear demographic change in the people using heroin. And we do sometimes call them Jerry addicts for that reason. They always go on about heroin, how great heroin was in the good old days. It was fantastic then, it's all shit now. Heroin, 20 or 30 years ago, was wonderful. And no problems whatsoever. It's a very, I think it's a very boomer thing, perhaps. And it's a bit, and now I sort of look at it, working in the drug treatment service, it's a bit like a train spotting version with, if you entirely populated it with boomers. Euan McGregor has turned into Victor Meldrew. Is how it works out. I'm reminded in particular of a couple of our older people that I've looked after. And one I'm going to describe to you. We called him Crack Santa. Or, I called him Crack Santa. And he was a lovely guy, really charming, very funny, lots of good tales. And he had a long, white, flowing beard. He had twinkling eyes and a cheeky little smile. And, he really did remind me of Santa. Only perhaps, arguably, Santa, who has got a little bit carried away on Boxing Day and has been using crack for 6 months. And he was completely ravaged in that regard. There's an interesting little wrinkle that when you inject heroin and crack together, it's called snowballing. And I have a strong suspicion that Crack Santa fell in with the wrong elves on Boxing Day. Got very confused about snowballing, and it all went wrong from there. He came in to see me one day, and he was withdrawing. And that's the thing about hard drugs. Heroin actually makes you feel really unwell when you withdraw from it. And he was, and if I may use a medical term, he was rattling his tits off. He looked really unwell, and to be honest, a heroin rattle would make Prince Andrew sweat.
Impossible!
I'm not, that's the second mention of Prince Andrew. I'm not actually, are we allowed to call him Prince anymore? The pedo formerly known as Prince. We gave him some methadone, Crack Santa, not Prince Andrew, and he got a lot better. He improved, and he came in the next week, and he was there again, telling me his tall tales. How they used to break into pharmacies, steal all the cough mixture, extract the morphine, and inject it into the remaining veins. Ho, ho, ho. They really were the days. And of course, he had a good moan about the snowflakes as well, because he has to do that. These snowflakes who are taking this shit heroin and overdosing, they're so weak. So I think we've all got our tribe, and that was definitely his tribe. And the thing about hard and soft drugs is it's possible to categorise drugs, and there is evidence that can be done. Professor David Nutt has done it a few years ago before he was involved in the nutsack affair. But we're not really interested in research. That's not how people work. They actually just go to the tribe and they tend to ignore the research. And goodness knows there's no correlation between the research and the legislation in terms of harms related to drugs. And we've all got a bad habit, if you like, of actually looking at other people and judging them. And it's very clear, even people who use drugs. The heroin addicts look down on the alcoholics. The alcoholics look at the crack fiends and think, what are you doing? And the crack fiends, they look down at people smoking pot and go, that's weak. Come on, do better. And the potheads, they just sit in the corner and giggle. They're really non-judgmental, to be fair. Boring bastards, they really are. We don't see too much of them in the drug treatment service. But I think the important thing is, we do know that heroin is one of the drugs that affects people the most in terms of harm. There is another drug that will actually cause the most harm in terms of society, but I'm not actually going to mention it. Partly because I'm stood above a pub at the moment. It doesn't really seem like the ideal moment. And actually, I'm really gasping as well. For it's been a long wait. We talk about nostalgia. It feels like a long time ago since we started. I really want to have a pint. So I'm going to say thank you very much and cheers.